Now, before we start, I would like to ask if you can excuse the title. There has been 9 million videos on the exact same topic, and at this rate, I had to stand out somewhat. So I'm sorry for the most unoriginal title on the planet, but it's a necessary evil so I can get my points across. But obviously, we all saw that Nintendo announced the remake of Ocarina of Time a few days ago. And I want to say that personally, I think from this 5-second shot of Link sleeping on a bed, it looks great. And I know that's a contentious opinion, and I'm going to delve into that later, because outside of the visuals, there is something that I find to be more important at hand, and it's what's actually in the remake. Now, there is basically two types of remakes. You have remakes that are basically one-to-one with the original game, with only some slight changes that most people will barely even notice. And then you have your remakes that change the game in drastic ways to create a new experience. And there are a lot of people that both think and want this remake to be the latter, and I disagree completely on both points. Now, a lot of people think this will be a full reimagining of Ocarina, simply because the description says that Ocarina of Time is reborn on Switch 2, and that it's just called Ocarina of Time. It's not titled Ocarina of Time HD or Remake, and those two are the only reasons people say this. Now, my counterpoint is that 1, Nintendo has never done something like that with any game they have ever remastered or remade. They really like to play it as safe as they possibly can when they update a game for a newer console. And additionally, the whole naming thing we have actually seen before. We saw it for Link's Awakening. They did the exact same naming scheme as Ocarina's Remake, where they just called it Link's Awakening. They didn't tack on any other name to it. And that game was pretty much just a one-to-one remake of the original. I see no reason to expect anything different here, and I don't even want anything different. And let's go over why I think that as well. Now, I'm going to use Arlo as an example here, and this is not an attack on Arlo. I love Arlo. I have watched him for years. I just disagree with him because he also wants this remake to be different. And he uses RE4 Remake as an example as to how this could be a good thing for this remake. And RE4, I think, is a bad comparison, because OG RE4 is nowhere near as intricately designed as Ocarina is. Like, they were able to just remove the U3 fight in the remake of RE4, and it doesn't drastically change the game to a point where it's completely different, because U3 isn't integral to the game's story or gameplay. It's just a simple boss fight that got recycled in separate ways. But if you remove a dungeon or add a dungeon in Ocarina, the entire game gets changed. Let me give you an example. The Cut Light Temple, right? It's probably the most popular and well-known cut piece of content from OG Ocarina. If they were to add that temple, you need to think about where they would place that temple. And most likely it would be the new first temple you would go to after waking up as adult Link. That would be the most likely place to put that new temple. But we're not thinking about the fact that that would change the story drastically. Remember, the reason that Link goes to the temples in Ocarina is to restore the sages, because Ganon killed all of the old sages when he entered the Sacred Realm. And so the reason for Link to go into the Light Temple would be the same, to restore a new Light Sage, which he wouldn't have to do if Rauru is still alive. So then they would have to change it to where Rauru dies so that there's a reason for a new Light Sage to be necessary in the first place, which would also hurt the narrative, because then there's no one to explain why the hell Link just woke up as an adult for no reason, and to explain what happened after the 7 years that Link has been in the Sacred Realm. And gameplay wise, they would obviously have to incorporate new items in the Light Temple and then redesign other dungeons in the world to make those new items useful. Do you see what I mean when I say that even one new dungeon would drastically change the game and none of it would be for the better? Because to me, when I say all of that out loud, that doesn't sound like an improvement to me. That just sounds like new content for the sake of new content. That just makes the game worse for no reason, and it stretches it out unnecessarily. And the same logic would be applied to other stuff like a bigger Hyrule. Any new content they add has to be useful to justify its existence. And it would bring so many big changes that wouldn't be improvements because Ocarina is just so tightly designed. I'm sorry if this might have been confusing to follow, but it's the best way I could find to illustrate my point, and why I don't think this should or will be a reimagining of Ocarina in any sense. Now, I'm not opposed to any changes at all. Obviously, I'm not saying that Ocarina is a flawless game, even though some people watching this would probably agree with that, but they need to be small and they need to be tasteful. They can't be big changes, because at that point, it's not even Ocarina anymore. Like, I wouldn't mind them making the combat more like Twilight Princess, because Twilight Princess has incredible combat, and the Hero of Time specifically teaches the Hero of Twilight his techniques. So both games having similar combat would make sense, and it would be an improvement. Or maybe an item wheel from Twilight Princess, or having D-pad functionality for item and gear equipping, or making Link as expressive as his Twilight Princess and Wind Waker counterparts, or making Navi less annoying. Like when she forces herself to talk every single time those like grabby guys come from the ceiling. A great example is in the Forest Temple, where there are two rooms right next to each other, and she will stop you right in your tracks just to tell you the exact same thing. Like, oh my god, Navi?
Shut the fuck up!
So making her just easily ignorable would be great. Or reworking the Ganon fight so it's not just a game of ping pong. Hell, I wouldn't even mind them reworking the Beast Ganon fight. They need to keep the cinematics though. Like, those are examples of good changes. A bad change would be making Rauru a furry for some reason, like I've seen some people suggesting. This is a different Rauru. That would probably be the biggest spit in the face I could imagine them doing. But the good changes I listed are the changes that I want. Those are the things that I'm looking for, and those are the changes I think are best for the game. I think a lot of people that want this remake of Ocarina are just people who want a new 3D Zelda game. And while I understand that, I don't think that we should be pushing that onto this remake. I think that's how this game ages poorly. And a lot of people will counter everything I said by saying, if you just want to play the same game again, just go play the original, which I think is disingenuous. I don't think it's unrealistic for anybody to expect the Ocarina of Time remake to be Ocarina. It's in the name. People are going to buy this remake expecting it to feel like the game that we played before, but better. That's the draw of the remake. And the stuff I just listed as bad, like a new dungeon, does not make the game better. That just makes it worse. I think the only instance of a new dungeon that I think could work is like a really optional side dungeon that lets you get magic armor. But even then, I don't even know where they would place that. Like, geographically in the world, I don't know where you would fit another dungeon. And let's not forget that you can't just go back and play them. Are you really going to buy an N64 just for one game? Or we can talk about the 3DS versions, which yet again, are you really going to buy a 3DS just for one game? Especially with the eShop being taken down? Ocarina is not some easily accessible game. Your average Joe is not going to go out of their way to do all of that shit no matter how good Ocarina is. Because it's such a pain in the ass. Especially if you want to try getting a ROM of Ocarina for something like Ship of Harkonnen. And I did it, but it was definitely a head scratcher. Unless you're a die-hard Zelda fan, most people are not doing all of that shit for one game they have never even played. Most of the modern Zelda fanbase has never played Ocarina of Time. Even though that might sound crazy, it's true. And the Switch 2 as a whole has sold almost 20 million units. That's a bunch of people that get to experience Ocarina for the first time, and it's easily accessible. So yeah, I think this Ocarina remake is a good thing, if it's one-to-one with the original with some slight changes and improvements. And I say age well, because look at Majora's Mask 3D, for example. People hate that game primarily because of just two changes. Like, they nerfed Deku skipping and Zora swimming, and those two changes automatically made it the inferior version of Majora's Mask, which is not what you want when you are remaking a game. I just don't understand the people that want Ocarina's remake to not be Ocarina. If you want a new game, which we all do, then keep waiting for a new game. Ocarina's remake doesn't have to be that, and I don't think that it should be. I think it's weird that some are expecting otherwise. And reminder that the last time this game got remade in any sense was in 2012, 14 years ago. I don't think the last time we got this was like this recent thing people are saying it is, because it's not. And I think people have every reason to be excited about this, especially if you have never played Ocarina before. And I think if this game does do well, then that's nothing but good news for this franchise. Because if a megaton of people buy this remake, well then maybe that'll show Nintendo that some classic Zelda elements are actually a good thing. And they might implement better dungeons and stuff in the future titles. I just don't see how this remake existing is a bad thing, or even worth getting upset about. There's nothing wrong about Ocarina getting remade. I just don't understand why some people are getting so upset about it. It's not even one group of people that are all getting upset about it. It's just a small piece of different types of Zelda fans getting upset. And let's talk about the thing about this remake that some people are getting upset about, and it's the art style. Now I'm going to say right off the bat that I think it's ridiculous people are getting so vividly upset about a 5-second scene of Link sleeping on his bed. Which, by the way, most likely everything we saw in that trailer was probably made just for the trailer, like the Triforce mark on his hand. That's most likely just for the trailer, and that's it. And even if it's not, that doesn't mean that Link has the Triforce. I've seen people getting upset about that. That doesn't mean he has the Triforce of Courage. It's either, like I just said, just for the trailer, or it's just a mark that signifies that he's worthy of the piece. We saw something similar in Skyward Sword, and it's not very unlikely that it's the exact same thing here. Like, I know we've been bashing Nintendo for absolutely screwing up Zelda's lore over the past like 10 years, besides Echoes of Wisdom. But I don't think they're that stupid to mess up a major plot point, which is just him having the Triforce of Courage. Because remember, he doesn't have to prove that he's worthy of it. That's not even a contradiction if he has the mark or not, because he doesn't go through a trial to prove that he's worthy of getting the Triforce of Courage. He just gets it while he's sleeping in the Sacred Realm, because Ganon split the Triforce when he went into the Sacred Realm. So either way, if he has this mark or not, It doesn't mean that he actually has the Triforce, and it doesn't break the canon or the story at all. It doesn't mean anything. And I don't think there's any reason to think otherwise, because yet again, we don't know. Like, we've barely seen the remake at all. So it's hard to come to a solid conclusion when all we have seen is this. Which, if there's one thing that we can all agree on, it's the fact that the reveal for this remake was shit. They focused more on thumb wrestling in this terrible direct than on Ocarina of Time. If they just spent like 2 or 3 minutes actually showing the remake, the conversation would be a lot different. I almost guarantee you that. But because everyone is focusing on the 5 seconds we saw, naturally I have to talk about it. I just think it's stupid. Like, this trailer is a good teaser trailer, but we shouldn't be getting a teaser trailer like 6 months before the game comes out. We should have gotten that shit in the February direct, and they should have showed the actual game and the gameplay at this direct. I don't understand what they were thinking. But anyway, a decent amount of people don't like the way that it looks, which is fine. I'm not going to be able to convince you to like something you don't like, but I find it funny that some people are saying that this looks like UE5 garbage just because it has good textures and lighting. Some people are saying this is realistic, and I don't understand why. It's not hyper realistic. It's definitely a more serious looking art style, but that's what Ocarina was already going for in the first place. Link does not look like a normal human child. If you want to see some realistic Zelda, I'll show you some realistic Zelda, alright? But I think that's where I want to make the distinction really quickly, because realistic does not describe this art style properly, or even Twilight Princess's art style. So I'm going to instead use the term serious when describing this art style, and I'm going to use the term cartoony for cel shaded. Now, like I said before, if you just don't like this art style because you just don't like it, then that's fine. That's just a preference. I can't change that, but what I can disprove was that this was never supposed to be how Ocarina of Time looked, which is massively incorrect. This was exactly what Ocarina was going for, and I got the sources to prove it. In an Iwata Asks interview for Twilight Princess, Takizawa, the enemy designer for Ocarina and art director for Twilight Princess, said that Twilight Princess would be continuing the aesthetic style of Ocarina of Time, and that they placed an emphasis on creating a similar atmosphere that was loved in Ocarina. Takizawa also said, realism in Zelda isn't a first with The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess. We did it in Ocarina of Time, but this is the first time that we've taken on the task of creating a realistic 3D Zelda style that pushes the GameCube's graphics to its limits. Our development team is highly motivated to step up to the challenge. We aren't trying to achieve photorealistic reality, however, and that's a vital distinction. When we look at Ocarina of Time now, we can't deny that the graphics quality isn't high, but you still get the feeling of each environment incredibly well. So this was always the intent. It was always trying to be a more serious and gritty Zelda art style, especially because the story of Ocarina is serious and gritty. There's a lot of dark stuff here, a lot of horrifying stuff that Link has to fight against and deal with in this game. Like, everybody knows the dead hand in the bottom of the well. Everybody knows the market after you become an adult. Everybody knows how dark and cool Ganon's fight is. Hell, I think the Fire Temple is more horrifying than people think it is. And I think one of the reasons people think otherwise is just because the graphics aren't insane in Ocarina. There's a bunch of polygons and rounded terrain. It's not a graphically impressive game anymore, and it hasn't been for over 2 decades. But that doesn't mean that this serious looking art style wasn't the intention. It was, and the full quote from Takizawa I just showed you addressed that as well. And a lot of people are going to bring up the key art, but the key art for Ocarina wasn't what they made this art style from. That key art was made after the fact. It was someone else's interpretation of Ocarina. This isn't actually what the game was trying to look like. I recommend watching Zeltic's video on this topic as well. He covered a lot of what I'm covering today, and I think he does a better job at explaining it than I ever could. Especially because I just don't want to repeat everything he already said. That's just a waste of time. So I really recommend after watching this video, you just go and check out his. If you haven't already, he's like 20 million times bigger than me. I don't know why you wouldn't have watched his video by now. But continuing, it was clearly supposed to look more like Twilight Princess, but clearly with a lot more saturation and color given the more fantastical elements that Child Link experiences before he ages up 7 years. What a lot of people don't know as well was that Twilight Princess was originally supposed to be a direct sequel to Majora's Mask, with the hero of time grown up and everything. And there's been this image floating around, and I think it's a perfect example of what Ocarina was going for. And you can compare it to Twilight Princess. And while clearly they are both similar, Ocarina's Link is very clearly a lot more saturated. And if there's one thing that I want for this game, it's just for a good amount of color in comparison to Twilight Princess. I think that's like the only flaw with the art direction of Twilight Princess. It's just that there should have been more color. And it's weird to me because people like to point to two different fan interpretations of Ocarina and compare them to this. So let's talk about those two interpretations. We got the Unreal Engine version and the cel-shaded version. Now I'm going to say off rip that both of these are wrong and miss the mark completely. I'm not calling these people out or anything, but I see people praising one or the other, and I just wanted to make it clear that I think both missed the mark on what Ocarina was actually going for. Now let's cover the Unreal Engine version. Now I think one of the biggest flaws of this version is that the lighting is not soft in the slightest. I don't know about you guys, but Kokiri Forest was never as bright as this. And that's what makes it weird, is the lighting is just so exaggerated. Even though Kokiri Forest, while saturated, always had that misty feel to it. It didn't crank up the brightness so high. And you can even see how exaggerated the lighting is in this scene of Link in the bedroom. Like, you can see each individual light ray piercing your eyeballs. It's just too much, it's visual overload. And the textures don't match the exaggerated lighting. There really isn't a lot of detail in the texture work, and a lot of the geo just blends together because of how smudgy the textures are. And it doesn't mesh well with the exaggerated lighting. A lot of people are wondering why the remake doesn't look like the 3DS version, and it's because if it did, it would look like the UE5 version. I'm serious, if you compare the two, they are a lot more similar than you think. This isn't an accurate remake of Ocarina of Time. It's more accurate to the 3DS version than anything else, and that's why it looks weird. If there's a perfect example of what I think a true remake looks like, it's the Majora's Mask Sealed Fate video we all know. And this cinematic, I think at least, is generally loved. I think it's insanely accurate and it looks really, really good. And a lot of the reason for that is the high quality of textures and the soft lighting. It's the complete opposite of the UE5 version, and it looks amazing, especially because it's not so visually cluttered. But now we have to talk about that cel-shaded version. Now this isn't a game, it's a bunch of renders made in Blender by this guy Endo, and it's his interpretation of Ocarina. And just like the UE5 version, this is not accurate to Ocarina, probably even less so. Now unlike the UE5 version, I actually really like how this looks. I think it looks great, and I would like an entire new Zelda game that looks like this, but it's not Ocarina. He based these designs off of the key art that we talked about earlier, but he took the easy way out, which is cel shading. The easiest way to directly translate art into a game is from cel shading, and that's why you see it for like Naruto in Fortnite or American Dad in Call of Duty. It's just easier to do that than to translate that art in a different style. A good example of this is comparing this cel shaded version to the 3DS version. The 3DS version is a much better translation of this art into the game because it's translating the art as opposed to just grabbing the art and slapping it into the game, which is what cel shading does. And that's the difference. Like, imagine the dead hands and the entire Shadow Temple being cel shaded. The atmosphere would be completely ruined because it's so dark, and sometimes the cel shading doesn't even look like the art. Like, he compared this shot from his render and this artwork and they look nothing alike. And I haven't even mentioned Majora in my discussion about the art style, because remember, Majora's Mask has the exact same art style of Ocarina. So whatever art style is chosen for Ocarina has to match Majora. And this cel-shaded style absolutely does not fit Majora's Mask. Imagine the moon being cel-shaded. It would look like shit, and it would completely lose that threatening presence. But now let's bring it back to the teaser that we got. After everything I said, what do you see? You can see softer lighting and really highly detailed textures. It really does remind me of that Majora's Mask video I showed you, and I think that's great. Like, you got the Kokiri tunic made of grass and fibers, which is why it's green, and that's a detail you would never know in any previous version of Ocarina. I love this art style. I love Twilight Princess and its art style. It's the best Zelda has ever looked to me, especially Link. Like, this motherfucker is my Link. It's my favorite version of Link, and none has ever come close. We have had cel shading for so long, and I am so glad that we are finally doing something different while remaining faithful to the original. And because we're getting an Ocarina remake, that also means we are most likely going to get a Majora's Mask remake, which has me incredibly excited. Because Majora's Mask is easily my favorite game in the entire franchise. It's one of my favorite games of all time. There are a few things I want to cover though before I end this video. I saw the voice acting in the trailer and I'm kind of indifferent to it. The thing is that if they want to do voice acting, I'm fine with that, but they need to rewrite a lot of the dialogue, because the dialogue in this game is meant to be read. I couldn't really imagine anyone saying some of the stuff that these people say, especially Ganondorf, without making me cringe. But I don't think voice acting is always a plus. There's always a charm in the silence, and sometimes it just boosts moments. And the added benefit of being able to name Link whatever you want, which can lead to a lot of funny scenes. I think there's positives for both, and it's okay if they do it, and it's okay if they don't do it. I just think a lot of people are getting worked up about a game we have barely seen. Mind you, all of my opinions surrounding the art style is based off a 5-second teaser. Even though my opinion is the only correct one, and you're not allowed to disagree with me, it's still not based on anything substantial. It's literally just this. I don't think anyone can form a 100% concrete opinion without seeing more, because this is basically nothing. But despite everything we just talked about, all the opinions I just threw out there, I am still really excited for this Ocarina remake. Even if the remake does end up not being good, I love this franchise so much, I need to play it either way. And one last thing before I go, I swear to God they better not remove the sex appeal of the fairies.